King Tut, the death mass, many of us grow away from it. And when we see a moment like this, it does bring everybody together.
Yeah, this is, it was during the celebration of the year 2022 of the decipherment of hieroglyphs.
Beneath the Egyptian desert, something appeared to be alive. In 1972, Soviet seismic equipment picked up a steady, measured pulse, a vibration repeating every 42 seconds. The discovery was so disturbing that the data was quietly filed away in classified archives and left untouched for decades. Why was such a signal hidden, and what force could possibly be creating it? Years later, modern satellites rediscovered the same anomaly. Scientists quickly realized the pattern could not be explained by geology, nature, or human activity. Then, when archaeologists finally broke into a sealed underground chamber that had remained untouched for 2,000 years, what they uncovered challenged everything historians believed about Egypt's past, political power, and the final days of its last pharaoh. This is the story of how Cleopatra's tomb was found and why what lay inside was never meant to be seen. For more than 2 millennia, Cleopatra II has existed as one of the most mysterious figures in history. She has been written about, painted, dramatized, and debated more than almost any other ruler in the ancient world. Yet one basic truth about her life remained unknown: where she was buried. Roman historians described a magnificent royal funeral filled with gold, ritual, and sacred ceremony, honoring both her Egyptian heritage and her ties to Rome. The mummies later studied by scholars and Egyptian scientists were believed to be servants buried alongside various pharaohs, but none belonged to Cleopatra herself. Ancient writers claim she was buried beside Mark Antony, her lover, political ally, and partner in war, but they never recorded the tomb's location. That silence has frustrated archaeologists for generations. Egypt is a civilization that preserved its dead with extraordinary care. The tombs of kings were discovered beneath pyramids, inside valleys, and carved into mountain cliffs. Even ordinary citizens left behind burial sites that survived thousands of years. Yet Cleopatra, the final ruler of a 3,000-year dynasty, vanished completely from the archaeological record. Some historians believed her tomb was destroyed during the Roman conquest, its treasures looted, and its stones reused. Others argued that earthquakes in Alexandria had submerged it beneath the Mediterranean Sea. A few suggested something even more deliberate, that Cleopatra herself arranged for her burial to remain hidden forever. Ancient priests described her death as a bride returning to Osiris, and spoke of a union unseen by men. Scholars have long debated whether these were poetic metaphors or literal instructions for a secret burial ritual older than the pyramids themselves. For centuries, the answers lay buried beneath the desert, waiting to be found. In 1972, a Soviet seismic team conducting underground surveys near Lake Marut, southwest of Alexandria, stumbled upon something inexplicable. Officially, they were searching for oil during the height of the Cold War, as Egypt was closely aligned with Moscow. Their instruments were expected to return predictable geological readings. Instead, they detected a slow, rhythmic vibration deep beneath the limestone bedrock. It was too regular to be natural seismic activity, yet too subtle to be machinery. The pulse rose and fell exactly every 42 seconds, like a massive heartbeat buried underground. They recalibrated their equipment, moved to new locations, and tested again. The signal remained unchanged. Local Bedouin tribes called the area the place that breathes. For generations, they had told stories of shifting sand with no wind and nights when the ground seemed to hum beneath their tents. The Soviets recorded these accounts but dismissed them as folklore. Eventually, the data was archived and forgotten as political priorities shifted and funding dried up. Decades later, in the early 2000s, advanced satellite imaging once again revealed something strange beneath the same limestone ridge. Thermal and radar scans showed sharp geometric formations underground, shapes that nature does not create. When researchers mapped the data, they realized the structure resembled an ankh, the ancient Egyptian symbol of eternal life. The shape was not physically carved into stone, but appeared clearly through deep ground scanning technology. The underground formation stretched toward a plateau historically linked to the cult of Isis, a goddess Cleopatra strongly associated herself with during her reign. She dressed in Isis's ceremonial robes, adopted her symbols, and ruled as her living embodiment. If she had designed her own tomb, connecting it to Isis would have made perfect sense. The satellite evidence suggested that whatever lay beneath the ridge had been intentionally placed there and had waited centuries to be discovered. An archaeological team assembled west of Lake Marriott, fully aware they were entering uncharted territory. Local populations had avoided the area for generations, warning that something unnatural existed beneath the ground. But the scientific readings were too compelling to ignore. Within hours of setting up camp, monitoring devices detected the same 42-second pulse the Soviets had recorded years earlier. The vibration was so precise that researchers began timing their watches to it. They tested for machinery, electrical interference, and nearby activity, but found nothing. The pulse appeared to come from deep within the earth itself, steady and unchanging. The number 42 held powerful meaning in ancient Egyptian belief. It represented the 42 divine judges who weighed the souls of the dead in the afterlife. Each judge asked a question that determined whether a person would enter eternity or be condemned to oblivion. The underground heartbeat matched the rhythm of divine judgment, a coincidence too perfect to ignore. After sunset, thermal imaging revealed even more of the hidden structure's vast scale beneath the desert sands. Thermal scans revealed heat signatures curving beneath the dunes, bending and reconnecting in patterns that looked like man-made corridors rather than natural rock formations. At dawn the next day, drone surveys detected faint ridges on the desert surface that aligned perfectly with the underground images. When all the information was layered together, the emerging structure was unmistakable. Its proportions mirrored temple architecture from Cleopatra's time with unsettling precision. This was not natural geology. This was intentional construction, deliberately buried and concealed for 2,000 years. Then came a night that no one on site would ever forget. Security cameras recorded something impossible. The sand itself began to ripple, gentle waves spreading across the surface in perfect rhythm with the underground pulse. And there was no wind at all. The movement was too exact, too synchronized, too directly linked to the signal below. Several workers who watched the footage refused to stay near the ridge. By morning, some had packed their belongings and left without explanation. Whatever lay beneath them was no longer inactive. It was a breathing temple. As excavation continued, carvings on the buried walls began to reveal a narrative that challenged scholarly beliefs held for centuries. The inscriptions identified the site as Taposiris Magna, the Great Tomb of Osiris, unsolved. For the researchers, this single name reshaped the meaning of everything beneath their feet. In Egyptian religion, Osiris was the god of resurrection, lord of the underworld, and the divine judge who granted eternal life. A temple dedicated to him was not ordinary land. It was sacred ground meant to bridge life and death. If Cleopatra chose this place for her burial, the symbolism would have been overwhelming. Throughout her reign, she presented herself as the living embodiment of Isis, wife of Osiris. To rest beside him in a temple of rebirth would have united her mortality with divine eternity. What shocked the team most was the language of the carvings. The inscriptions appeared in two scripts: Egyptian hieroglyphs and ancient Greek, executed with equal precision. This was extraordinary. Egyptian temples almost never mixed languages in sacred spaces where every symbol carried spiritual weight. The presence of both scripts suggested direct royal command, likely an order from someone who ruled both the Greek-speaking elite and the Egyptian priesthood. Dr. Martinez immediately understood the significance. Cleopatra governed between two worlds, and her burial site reflected that dual identity. The temple was neither purely Egyptian nor purely Hellenistic. It was both at once, just as she had been. Artifacts surrounding the site reinforced this interpretation. Coins bearing Cleopatra's likeness were discovered near statues of Isis holding a falcon, a symbol of renewal. Chemical tests on an altar revealed traces of blue lotus resin and embalming substances reserved for royalty. Everything pointed toward a burial of the highest status. Then the instruments reacted again. Ground sensors picked up a deep, low-frequency hum rising from beneath the limestone foundation. It was inaudible to human ears but appeared on monitors as slow repeating waves, every 42 seconds, the same rhythm that had followed the team since their arrival. The vibration grew stronger the deeper they dug, as if the temple itself was responding to their presence. Workers reported feeling tremors through their boots. Some described a pressure behind their eyes that pulsed in time with the signal. Readings indicated that whatever was producing the vibration lay beneath the temple floor, deeper than they had yet reached. Despite increasing fear, the team pressed on. The source was close. Then came the moment that silenced the entire room. Radar revealed a tunnel beneath the sanctuary stretching through solid limestone for over a kilometer. Perfectly straight, flawlessly smooth, and precisely level from start to finish. Even modern engineers would struggle to create such accuracy today. Carved more than 2,000 years ago, the tunnel showed no cracks, no erosion, no sign that time had touched it. A camera lowered through a narrow borehole confirmed the scans. The tunnel walls were polished like glass, reflecting light with eerie clarity. There were no tool marks, no rough surfaces, and no explanation for how ancient builders achieved this perfection. The corridor defied normal archaeology, too precise, too preserved, too intentionally hidden. Along the walls, the same phrase appeared repeatedly in both Greek and Egyptian: Ankre, life renewed. Dr. Martinez interpreted it as a ritual passage, a sacred pathway guiding the dead toward resurrection and eternal existence. If Cleopatra had traveled this corridor, she would have walked the same symbolic path as Osiris himself when he returned from death to rule the underworld forever. Following the signal deeper, the team approached a sealed chamber at the tunnel's end. Thermal imaging showed a circular cavity about 20 meters wide, radiating heat several degrees higher than the surrounding rock. The stone appeared to have been exposed to extreme temperatures long ago and never fully cooled. When they finally breached the barrier, the sound was not a sharp crack of stone. It was a deep vibration felt in the chest rather than heard with the ears. A rush of cold air burst from the darkness, carrying the ancient smell of resin and metal. When the lights came on, they revealed a chamber unlike anything they had imagined. The walls were coated in black glass, rock melted and fused by unimaginable heat. Above them, the ceiling glittered with hundreds of lapis lazuli stones arranged into constellations depicting Isis raising her hands over Osiris as beams of starlight connected them across eternity. Then they noticed warnings carved into every surface. At the center lay a black sarcophagus. When the seals finally cracked, no one moved. The sound that escaped was not breaking stone. It was like a slow, heavy exhale from the chamber itself. The air that poured out struck the team like a wave, thick with resin, ammonia, and an ancient chemical sharpness that burned their throats and made their eyes water instantly. Later analysis confirmed that the sealed coffin had trapped poisonous gases inside for nearly 2,000 years, levels strong enough to be lethal. What should have been a moment of triumph instead felt like a violation. At the center of the chamber sat the sarcophagus, imposing and absolute. Carved from a single block of black granite, its surface carried a slick, oily gleam that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The lid alone weighed several tons and had been bonded shut with a hardened mixture of lead and resin meant to seal out both air and time. When a crane finally lifted the lid away, warm air poured out from within. The interior was noticeably hotter than the surrounding chamber, as if something inside had been generating heat for centuries in total darkness. 2 bodies lay inside, wrapped in linen woven with threads of gold. Over millennia, the fabric had fused into a solid mass, and their funerary masks had partially melted into the wrappings, leaving only distorted impressions of the faces beneath. Between them rested a bronze cylinder positioned precisely between their arms, as though they had been holding it together at the moment of death. It vibrated faintly against the stone, pulsing every 42 seconds. Perfectly synchronized with the mysterious signal that had followed the excavation from the beginning. The male body showed clear signs of ritual alteration. His chest had been deliberately opened, his ribs bent outward, and his heart cavity filled with hardened resin mixed with mercury. This was not preservation, it was containment. The female body was far better preserved. Her wrapping stiffened into a protective shell. Flecks of gold glimmered through the linen, including a brooch near her chest and a pendant shaped like Isis resting directly over her heart. But what stunned the team into silence was the bracelet around her wrist. A blackened metal cobra, fangs bared. The very creature history claimed had ended her life. Dr. Martinez stood frozen before the open coffin. When she finally spoke, there was no awe in her voice. "We wanted answers. This feels like punishment." Beyond the burial chamber, the passage continued. It narrowed sharply, then opened into a circular room that radar scans had failed to fully reveal. What the team found inside shifted the discovery from extraordinary to deeply disturbing. Carved into the walls were shallow alcoves arranged in a perfect ring. Inside each alcove sat a single human skull, upright on a stone shelf, its empty eye sockets staring toward the center of the chamber. They counted 36 skulls in total, 12 adult men, 12 adult women, 12 children. There were no bodies, no coffins, no other bones, only skulls, arranged with chilling precision. Each skull had been carefully prepared. The eye sockets were coated with a thin layer of gold powder that glittered under the lights. Bone analysis later revealed traces of blue lotus resin, the same substance used in the royal embalming process. These were not victims of violence or discarded remains. They had been selected, processed, and placed here intentionally. Every skull was missing its lower jaw. Forensic examination confirmed this was deliberate, a form of ritual decapitation meant to prevent reconstruction. Whatever these people had been in life, in death, they had been reduced to silent sentinels, unable to speak, frozen in eternal watch around the chamber's center. At the heart of the room stood a low stone platform carved in the shape of an ankh. On it rested two small bronze cups fused together by extreme heat. One still contained a thin crust of blackened residue that tested positive for human blood. Above the alcoves, a single inscription circled the entire chamber in both Greek and Egyptian. The translation read, "They guard the passage and keep the balance." Some scholars interpreted this as a prayer invoking Isis as guardian of the underworld. Others believed it meant something far darker, that these 36 individuals had been placed here as living guardians, sacrificed to maintain a supernatural equilibrium tied to the burial. They were not merely accompanying the queen into eternity, they were restraining something, holding it in place, preventing it from escaping. Electromagnetic sensors brought into the room began registering abnormal energy spikes every 42 seconds, synchronized with the underground pulse. Team members reported physical effects, pressure behind the eyes, a metallic taste in the mouth, and worsening headaches the longer they remained inside. Dr. Martinez was the first to step toward the central platform. She froze almost instantly, her face draining of color. She tasted metal on her tongue and immediately ordered the chamber sealed and all personnel evacuated. Before the recording equipment was shut down, she spoke one final, chilling sentence. "This is not a tomb. It is a mechanism made of death." Within hours, news of the discovery spread through academic and government channels. Images of the burial chamber and the circle of skulls leaked onto private forums before authorities locked the site down completely. Reactions were divided. Some demanded the chambers be sealed forever. Others called for full public disclosure. A smaller group asked a terrifying question no one wanted to confront. If the circle of skulls was functional, if these 36 guardians truly maintained some kind of balance, what had changed when the seals were broken? All evidence pointed toward a conclusion that defied conventional history. This was not a burial in any traditional sense. The dual language inscriptions, the flawlessly engineered tunnel, the temperature anomalies, the rhythmic pulse, and the arrangement of bodies and skulls suggested a design far beyond a royal tomb. The structure functioned like a system, one meant to operate long after Cleopatra's death. If she truly built this, she possessed knowledge and resources historians have never credited to her reign. The tunnel's precision rivaled modern engineering. The chamber's ceiling used materials and techniques absent from any surviving records of her era. The 42-second pulse remains unexplained and still registers on instruments today. Some scholars have begun to reassess Cleopatra entirely. Perhaps she was far more than the seductive figure Roman propaganda portrayed. Perhaps she foresaw the fall of her empire and sought to preserve something far greater than her name. Rome could conquer Egypt, parade her children, and rewrite her legacy. But they never found her body. They never claimed their final trophy. For 2,000 years, she remained beyond their reach. The question that haunts researchers now is simple yet impossible to answer. What was Cleopatra protecting? Was it merely her dignity in death? Her refusal to be humiliated by Rome? Or was it something far greater, hidden knowledge, forbidden power, or a truth she believed must be guarded across millennia? The inscriptions warned that disturbing the union would break the balance. The skull chamber guarded the passage. The bodies were sealed to contain. not preserve. Every element pointed to a single purpose: keeping something inside rather than keeping intruders out. 2,000 years later, the chamber is silent, but the signal remains. Deep beneath stone and sand, something still responds every 42 seconds, patient, precise, and awake. The tomb has been sealed again, the data classified, the questions deliberately left unanswered. History may claim Cleopatra's story is finished. The evidence suggests otherwise. If a queen planned a final act meant to echo across millennia, if she engineered a message only the future could detect, then what exactly was she waiting for us to understand?